Hey, so doing Johnny Bench this week for the Hall of Fame project. Out here roasting some coffee. It's cooling now. Got some that I just finished roasting, and it is getting ready to be bagged. Some of it's going to a guy that I work with. He and his wife like to drink my coffee, and then for church this weekend. So if you're ever in Western Pennsylvania, you want to come to church where you can get good coffee. I know the place for you. But anyway, I've been wanting to do Johnny Bench for a while, for I think obvious reasons, but I was hesitating because there are some of his cards that I think are great cards that I don't have yet, and just haven't come across them, at a show or a shop or anything for a price that I was looking for. Um, but then when you begin to think about it, a couple things. One, I think I've got his best looking card. We'll show it here in a minute. I think I've got the bench card that I want in my binder. I don't think that I want to switch it up, but I'll give you the chance to talk me out of that. Um, but also, he's one of these guys that I think most of his cards are good cards, like good cards to look at. Most people's runs, you can kind of like, well, they've got three or four really good cards, and I think Johnny Bench is one of those guys that like he has so many good cards, and I don't have his 69, which I think is a phenomenal card. I don't have his 73, which is a great shot of him. Um, but I do have some of his other ones, which I'll show you here in a little bit. But and so I was just kind of waiting. Like, no, I'm not going to wait any longer. I'm going to show you what I have. I just picked up one of the ones I didn't have, which I'll show in this video. I showed it in a previous video, but I'll show you that along with the rest of his tops run that I have. But let's talk about him as a player first. And uh, pretty incredible career. Most people, if you were to ask them who the greatest catcher of all time was, they would probably, well, they'd probably say Johnny Bench. I was going to say they'd probably mention him at least, but most people would just say he's the best catcher ever. If he's not the best, he's certainly in the top two or three, just kind of depending on who's making the list. And I don't think any Reds fans would argue with that. Maybe some Yankees fans would have a little bit of a problem. But anyway, just a phenomenal player. Started out very young. He was drafted when he was 17 in the first Major League Baseball draft. He was uh, just pretty good from the beginning, although he wasn't very good. It's kind of funny now you think about it. He wasn't a very good batter. Like, he wasn't, I think he batted a 163 or something, or a 183. I think it was 163 before he got called up into the majors. Like, he got called up in 68 and just did not have, like, prior to that, before he got called up, the numbers for that didn't really present themselves. But he did have a good arm, and they're like, well, we needed a good arm, which is kind of funny because his dad had told him when he was a kid, when he said, I want to make it to the majors. His dad had kind of had a dream of making it to the major leagues, but had served in the military for 8 years and just hadn't been able to do that. And his dad said, well, they need catchers, and so if you want to play in the majors, you need to be a catcher. And so he did that. Of course, he was actually really good in high school, a really good pitcher as well. And he talks about that a little bit. If you listen to interviews with him, he'll talk about pitching when he was in high school and stuff. And so just kind of did everything. He played for a pretty small school. So he got to do a variety of positions, but of course one of them was catcher. So when he gets called into the majors, anyway, let's get back to the majors. When he gets called into the majors, it's 1968, and he makes the Rookie of the Year. He's one of the youngest players to do that, to maybe the youngest. He's on the list. Like, when you look at his career, because of how young he started, if you look at lists like youngest player to achieve this or to achieve that, he's on a lot of those lists, including the youngest player to win MVP. He's not the youngest, but he's like second or third on the list of the youngest players to win the MVP, because he did that. His first MVP he won when he was 22 years old in 1972. He won again in 1974, I believe. He's a two-time MVP, uh, just a just phenomenal. 10-time Gold Glove winner, 14-time All-Star. Of course, most people know Johnny Bench as the leader, or at least one of the leaders of the Big Red Machine, playing for the Cincinnati Reds. Of course, he played for the Reds his whole career, but playing for the Reds there in the 70s during their, I mean, like Big Red Machine. There is when they were strong. As a Pirates fan, knowing my Pirates history, the Reds come up a lot at unfortunate points for the Reds. Although the Pirates kind of won some of their share as well, but he just again a great career, great part of that Big Red Machine. I probably don't need to spend any time talking about that, but he still holds the records for the most home runs by a Cincinnati Red and the most RBIs. He has 389 home runs, 1,376 RBIs, which are the most. He used to have the record for the most home runs by catcher in that position. I think he's lost that since then, but he had it when he retired. Again, when you think about his career, just how good it was, and he was part of the Major League Baseball put out their all-century team, and he was the catcher for Major League Baseball's all-century team. So they did put him over Yogi Berra, which is saying something. At least whoever's, of course, again, that's just people's opinions, like anything else. But his strength at the catching position was that he did it all. Was that he was a great defensive catcher. It was hard to steal bases against Johnny Bench, but he was also good at bat. Like he was a great hitter and great slugger, and so just fantastic. Actually, kind of a funny thing, when he was in the minors before he came up to the majors, he hit a grand slam off of Jim Palmer. And Jim Palmer never let up another grand slam. Like Jim Palmer was in the minors, never let up a grand slam in the majors, but his only grand slam he ever let up was in the minor leagues, and it was to Johnny Bench. So Johnny Bench had a bat too. He wasn't just a great catcher. Of course, one of the funny stories about Bench during his early in his career was when he was catching for Jim Maloney. And Jim Maloney was pitching, and he had been pitching in the majors for, I think, 7 years, and his fast pitch wasn't quite as fast as it had been before. And Johnny Bench is catching, and he's trying to get him to throw something else, something other than his fastball. And so he kept calling a different pitch, and Maloney's shaking him off and throwing his fastball, and it's just not the velocity that Bench knows that it should be for him to be throwing that. If you're going to throw a fastball in major leagues, you better make it fast, and it wasn't fast. And so they finally had a bit of an argument about it. And of course, Johnny Bench is young. This player's been in the major leagues for 7 years, so he's older. He's not too keen on having this young kid tell him that he can't pitch fast enough, and so he sends him back to catch, and so Johnny Bench calls for a fastball, and Maloney pitches the ball, and Johnny Bench takes off his glove and catches it barehanded, just to kind of show that maybe it's not as fast as you think it is. And I'm not sure how their friendship was after that story. It probably wasn't too great. But if you're talking about the career of Johnny Bench, there's a lot of those things. He's got a lot of great stories. He's part of a fantastic team. But if you only focus on the career part of his life, I think you miss a lot of what made Johnny Bench Johnny Bench. He had a couple of very difficult episodes in his life prior to his major league career. When he was 16, he was on a school bus that was in an accident. The brakes went out as they were going down a hill, and rolled a few times, killed a couple of people, a couple of his classmates, his friends. And then when he was 18, he was hit by a drunk driver and folded his car in half. And the doctor said most people wouldn't walk away from something like that. He said that Johnny Bench had the biggest bones he'd ever seen. And most people wouldn't walk away, but he'd be suffering with that for the rest of his life. Now you can imagine all these broken bones he has when he's 18 years old and still going out there to catch. The most difficult, physically the most demanding position in Major League Baseball. And still goes out there and does it. And then in 1972, in the middle of one of his major league seasons, they start doing some tests, and they find a spot on his, I think it was on his lung, and they're not sure what it is. So they had a surgery scheduled to remove it after the season ended. So you can imagine that being on his mind. And I was listening to an interview with him, and they were asking him just like, "What do you do about that? How did you handle that?" And he said, "Well, you just go out and play. Like it's my job. That's what I do." And so he just went out and played, and he played phenomenally. Thankfully, they found out that it was benign. It wasn't an issue, but that was post surgery, and it's a very invasive surgery. It wasn't as invasive for him as it had been. They found a doctor who could do it a different way, but which sort of saved his ability to play longer in his career, but it hampered him the rest of his life. But one of the reasons why I've wanted to do Johnny Bench for so long, and I promise I'll get to cards in just a minute, is because Johnny Bench's name kept coming up as I was doing research for pretty much every other player. Almost every other player I've done, Johnny Bench's name has come up in my research as I've listened to podcasts and listened to them talk about it for a couple of reasons. One, just because the people who played with him and against him, they remember him. You know, he was a good sportsman. He was a great player, very competitive, but and so they talk about that. But post career, Johnny Bench, once he got into the Hall of Fame, which he first ballot Hall of Famer, 96% of the vote or something crazy like that. He's one of those guys you're like, whoever voted against him needs to have their vote rights taken away. But you know, just obviously easily into the Hall of Fame. And so when after he got into the Hall of Fame, he has this thing that he does now with players when they're inducted into the Hall of Fame. And he takes them up and he sits them down because he knows it's such a busy weekend and you're meeting people and you're doing things with family and with press and other players and you're so busy, and he knows how important it is for them just to take a minute and sit down. And so he takes them out on a veranda and they sit down on a rocking chair and they look out over a lake, and he just sits there and says, just take a minute and think about where you are. And he does this for every player that gets into the Major League Hall of Fame. And so it's gotten to the point where the other players know he's going to do this, and they'll Johnny, you gonna do this again? Yeah, I'm gonna do it. So they'll go get him. They'll go get players. He'll say, hey, give me 5 minutes, and just his ability to affect players as they're going into the Hall of Fame. You know, this is one of the things that I like about a lot of these players. I like character. You know, character matters in this sport and really in anything, but I like this about Bench is he seems to not just have had a fantastic career, but post career, what a great guy he is, and how much he's supported and helped others who are playing. You know, he's helped coach and stuff like that, but also just the people who've made it into the Hall of Fame that he's helped in that process. So enough of that, enough rambling. Let me show you some cards. I'll show you what I have. And you can tell me if I need to switch up, but I'll tell you right now, you're going to have a hard time convincing me, and I'll show you why. Let's change things around, and I'll show you some cards. Alright, so I maybe should have titled this video, Try to Talk Me Out of It, because the card I have that's currently in mine, I don't think I will change it, but if you can convince me to change it, then we'll see about that. I do not have, I obviously don't have his rookie, which isn't eligible anyway. I don't have his 69 or his 70. His first card I have is his 71, which is certainly a great card. And then I kind of have this hole. I don't have his 72, 3, or 4. This is the one I just picked up. I showed this one in a recent video. I picked this up just this past weekend, 75. I'm not sure what somebody wrote, 442 on the top. I'm not sure what that's supposed to mean, but 75. And here is what I consider to be not just Johnny Bench's best card, but this is, I mean, it's certainly my favorite card of the 76 set. Just a fantastic card. I love this card. I love catchers in their gear. And Johnny Bench was, of course, you know, in all of his catching career, he's known as kind of the guy who revolutionized the position of catcher. So, like seeing him, I think, in his catcher's outfit is important. I think it's good for him. I do have some of his other cards that he's not in his outfit. This is the 78. You probably knew that, but I have others of his cards that are not in his catcher's gear. He's hitting. Of course, he's a phenomenal hitter. So you can understand why they would have wanted cards with him hitting as well. 79, and yet again the 80. I actually like the 80 shot. This is a great shot of him hitting. 81. Just a nice portrait of him. And then I have his final card, which is the 83. At the end of the 83 season, he went to the ownership and told them he was going to retire. And they said, well, do you want to go play for the Cardinals? Whitey Herzog wants you. And he said, no, I'm retiring. So I'll just make one other comment about this. It's the years that they did these Topps cards with the All-Star logos on their main card. It kind of shows you a little bit about what he was. All three of those are All-Stars. 75 is an All-Star. 81. That's what happens when you're a 14-time All-Star. Just a phenomenal player. So anyway, I'll leave it at that. Like I said, if you think you can talk me out of putting the 76, or think I'm crazy for even considering anything else, like I said, I know he has some great cards, but my goodness, that 76, what a fantastic image of him. So thank you for watching. I went on a little bit longer today, but appreciate your time, and we'll see you on the next one.